I'm Mark Golub, and in the news, a flurry of concerns. From a worry that anti-Semitic incidents in America are becoming more prevalent, to the related concerns over the BDS movement with its acts of intimidation on college campuses and its insidious attempts to delegitimize the State of Israel, to the political scene in America in general, the presidency of Donald Trump, and the issues surrounding President Trump's personal style, domestic agenda, and foreign policy, especially as it may impact the State of Israel. These are bizarre times, troubling times, as many Jews see it. Well, to share some perspective on the sweep of Jewish life today and to update us on affairs really throughout the Jewish world, I'm so pleased to have on our JBS phones once again the man who in many ways represents American Jewry to the American administration, to the State of Israel, and to Jewish communities and foreign governments around the world, Malcolm Hoenlein, Executive Vice Chairman of the Conference of Presidents of Major American Jewish Organizations. Malcolm, thank you so much for joining us again.
It's always a pleasure. It's been a while because we've been away, but it's good to be back with you.
It's wonderful to have you on again. I've missed you. And look, you recently returned from another foray with the President's Conference. You were in Jerusalem. You did some traveling. Bring the JBS audience up to date. Where were you, and what do you feel came out of all the traveling you've done over the past month?
So I started in England, where I addressed both the Board of Deputies, the Jewish community leadership, met with people from the Middle East who are based or visited England, and then spoke at the Limud FSU, which was a wonderful gathering of 700-800 people, mostly from FSU countries, former Soviet Union countries, and others. And it was a weekend-long program, that part of the series around the world. We're bringing these people back to their roots, engaging them in a whole wide variety of presentations, and I was privileged to be a speaker there and to participate. And from there, I went to Israel.
Hold on, Malcolm. Fascinating. I want to know what you felt the tone of Jewish life was in Great Britain as you visited England. What was the feel you got?
It's a good question, because I was at the House of Lords and I met with people. As I said, I spoke to the Board of Deputies and had a chance to hear from them. Obviously, everybody's obsession is one subject, and that is President Trump, trying to understand, wanting to learn about him, wanting to know what he is about and likely to do. I felt that that they now see that America is meeting some of the same challenges that Great Britain faced. And as you know, because I said it on your programs for 10 years, that Britain is the model, I think, for America in terms of BDS 10 years ago, and I think for anti-Semitism, that unlike the French, which is bottom-up, that America, the BDS movement was the top-down. When it comes to anti-Semitism, I'm not sure that is the case, and it may well be a combination of the French and British models of bottom-up. But there was widespread concern in England about political expressions by some in the Labour Party about anti-Semitism, anti-Semitic events, and mostly the threat of ISIS returning to Britain. And there have been statements by security leaders in Britain talking about the threat that this posed, not specifically to the Jewish community, but overall. But clearly Jews are a primary target.
Did you feel that the Jewish community was in some way feeling more vulnerable than when times before you visited?
I find that everywhere today in Europe and in the United States, that the Jewish communities are seeing forces unleashed in Europe and here, that it's not a sudden transition. This is something that's been going on for many years, and it's not a particular event, but certainly the elections in Europe and here are underscoring it, giving greater platform for those who express extremist views on the left and on the right. And I find that people are deeply concerned about it, and more people talk about Aliyah, talking about the prospects for their kids' futures.
Do you worry that there is in any way a sense that British Jewry may begin to up and leave, or do you feel that at the moment it is secure and it sees a long-range future in Great Britain?
I think that they are not talking about a mass exodus. You hear that much more in France or in other countries where you have smaller Jewish communities, but in France because of the greater incidence. But Britain has also seen a sharp increase, and people I met told me that they were not sure what the future would hold for their children. But you have tight-knit communities in London, Manchester, other places, and despite the increased incidence of anti-Semitism, you don't see a mass outflow. And in fact, you had French Jews who moved to England, but I would not say that anybody is certain about the future anywhere in Europe, what the impact of Brexit will be, what the impact of the trends that they see with the extremist parties, and the fact that Corbyn and others in the Labour Party are flirting with anti-Semitism publicly.
Okay, before I ask you to keep taking us on a travelogue here, I want to spend one moment with you on the issue of anti-Semitism, because it suddenly is front page all over the Jewish world. And I've said on JBS, we should not be ostriches with our heads in the stand, but neither should we be alarmists. I want your sense, Malcolm, we've talked about this over the years, as you look at anti-Semitism in America and as you traveled abroad, what's your feeling? To what degree are you very concerned? To what degree do you believe that this is an expression of something that's latent under the surface all the time, and that while we should be ever vigilant, it is no greater threat today than it was a year ago?
I would say it's a combination of almost all of the factors you raised. That is that this has been a progression that we have noticed for a long time. I think that the BDS movement, operating under the guise of dealing with occupation or other political issues, a thin guise that was quickly removed, and at its core you see that it is fundamentally anti-Semitic.
Absolutely.
And it raised the specter of anti-Semitism on campuses where we've seen physical violence, and frankly I'm more concerned or as concerned about the campuses as I am about our communities, and the fact that you've had these threats, bomb threats, 140, 150 of them, and other threats as well, that this is disturbing, it's disrupting of Jewish life, it dissuades people from attending events, it may even have parents think twice about sending their children, enrolling them, and now as we enter the early enrollment period, it's a matter of special concern, and I hope parents will not succumb to those concerns that, thank God, so far none of these have been realized, but the fact that it doesn't take much for somebody to get phone numbers and be able to call JCCs or call other places. It has a psychological impact, and we are seeing that all over, and that people are on heightened concern, heightened alert, and that is necessary. And it's necessary that institutions, all our communities, do much more to address the security issues by being prophylactic, preventative measures, that training and hiring guards or putting up cameras, all the things that so often get shunted aside when institutions do their budgets. Security became a stepchild. Now is becoming increasingly a priority, and we want to see the federal government, state governments, like Governor Cuomo did, increase the amounts of money that is made available to protect these institutions, to give them, to enable them to buy the hardware and software and other things that will enhance the security situation on a local level and across the country. We want to see. And we've had meetings with the heads of the FBI, DHS, Department of Homeland Security. They've been very responsive. Police officials have been responsive. NYPD in particular has always been in the forefront of these efforts. But we have to stay on it. We have to see sustained efforts, both on the part of the community and on the part of law enforcement and the government. And the that starts with at the White House, and it goes through the Congress, and it goes to every one of the individual agencies that impact security. It has to be known that this is outside the pale, and that means that those in entertainment, in sports figures who are models to young people, to academics, to religious leaders, all of them have to speak out and address this issue. We are the victims, the Jewish community, but we are not the cause, and we are not the problem. The problem is society, and that society breeds these kind of activities, and therefore we have to show that this is unacceptable. And I have to say that the response in many parts of the country by non-Jews,
yes,
and I was deeply moved. I don't know if you read the story of the woman on the subway when she came in and saw the swastikas, took out her hand sanitizer and a tissue and just started scrubbing.
Yes.
And all of a sudden the people next to her did. And then ultimately the whole car was engaged in doing it. And I think there is a rejection. You see the volunteers who go out to the cemeteries, people of all faiths. And I think it is the American people reject anti-Semitism. Jews, according to the Pew poll, are the most popular people in America, religious group in America.
Yes. We even
conflicting signs and symptoms, but we can't afford to put our guard down. We have to work to maximize and assure our community so every kid who goes, every parent who sends a child, any adult who attends an event knows that they will be secure.
By the way, to add to the list, we saw that in a number of instances, the Muslim community responded.
I said all faiths. You're absolutely right.
Beautiful.
People from Muslim faith did too.
Yeah. Now, I want to contrast that for you with the message Abe Foxman keeps putting out. Abe keeps cautioning the Jewish community not to overreact to anti-Semitism, and he is adamant in telling the Jewish community to stop beating up on Donald Trump, that this is not a Trump phenomenon, that there's always been a degree of latent anti-Semitism. And yes, in general, there's a different climate, but that the climate precedes Donald Trump's election. What would you say to Abe Foxman's perspective?
Well, first of all, I do agree that sometimes the publicity invites copycatting, but at the same time, putting the limelight on it, often forces them back under the rocks. And the fact that law enforcement agencies are so adamant and determined and make that manifest so that you deter people from engaging in these activities. There is a delicate line to walk. So first of all, I have said publicly, repeatedly, that it's ridiculous to say that the President Trump is an anti-Semite. It demeans the seriousness of the term and of the charge, and I think that there's clear evidence that the trend on anti-Semitism, the incidents were in place, and that I do believe the election unleashed some of the forces, but it came as much from the extreme left as the extreme right, not because of the candidates, but from their some followers or people associated or even not associated with them. But it came from both extremes, and we see the same in Europe, that those, when the left and the right goes far enough, they ultimately meet, and they meet at the most extreme points. So the tendency and the trend has been there for a while. I think the election exacerbated it, and the divisiveness that has emerged from it, I think it's very regrettable, and the haters will take advantage of this continued divisions within our society. I think there are legitimate principle differences. I think they can be expressed and debated and addressed in respectful ways. But to demonize the president or we held him to account when he didn't make statements on anti-Semitism, you got to also give him credit for the fact that he has. And even in his address to Congress, it was the first thing that he said there.
That's right.
And even talked about Israel also, which got almost no notice.
Yes.
So I think that it's striking a balance. You cannot ignore this. We have an obligation. We have a responsibility. We will be held to account if we fail to do everything that needs to be done. And holding everybody at the federal, state, local levels to account, holding our communities to account, our institutions, that is not, I think that is the minimum that we must do, and then to take the steps to enhance security.
Okay, one more question on this area, then we move on. You spoke about BDS. Malcolm, on JBS, we've been spending a lot of time focusing on the virulent, insidious BDS movement. Recently, we had different programs, one with Susan Tuckman, one with Charles Jacobs, Danny Ayalon was here, all talking about BDS on campus. And I received a correspondence from one of our viewers, a man named Leo Goldner, wrote a passionate letter in which he said, the only way the BDS movement can ever be stopped on campus is if the Jewish community goes after the campus, college, university administrations, is ready to bring lawsuits and to hold them account for permitting a certain kind of anti-Semitic, anti-free speech, the denigration of the First Amendment, all in the name of some kind of pro-Palestinian effort. And he was lamenting the fact that he felt the organized Jewish community has not used these kind of legal means to go after not the people who are BDS, but the university administrations which permit it. To what degree do you feel Leo has a point? What do you feel the Jewish community should be doing in terms of reacting to university administrations where BDS seems so active?
Well, for one, I think Leo is absolutely correct, and we have felt so for a long time, and that is why the Lawfare Project has been doing exactly what he suggested, and that is holding administrations to account, having lawyers go onto the campuses to protect the rights of Jewish students and others to assure the safety and security of Jewish students. We are working with many university administrations, many of the organizations on the local level, Hillels and Chabad's and other organizations on campus have been active in this regard. We must hold the universities to account, the administration, the deans, the presidents, faculty to account, and often faculty are perpetrators in this case, and to use alumni and donors and all the leverage that we can, state and public officials who give money and support to these universities if they fail to act appropriately. And that one of the things that we're doing is pushing for the Secretary of Education, and Carol Maloney wrote a letter this week at our suggestion and others, that they adopt a definition that the State Department developed on anti-Semitism, and that universities be held to account. That it's not an amorphous standard, but that there has to be a clear definition, and that universities that fail to take the proper steps, that fail to act against those who violate and the rights of students, when we see racism and bigotry and anti-Semitism on the campuses, that they have to be assertive in their responses. So I couldn't agree more, but in fact, we are doing exactly what he said, and as are others, working together to try to protect our students and to assure that the pro-Israel voice will continue to be heard.
Okay. At some other time, you and I will go into the degree to which you feel we have been effective in this area or whether we still need lots of work. But I want you to come back now to this fabulous journey that you have just returned from. After England, where did you go?
So I went to Israel for the preparation of our visit, and we left from there to Morocco, where more than 50 members of the President's Conference joined us, and we spent 6 days there through Shabbat in a really magical trip, and His Majesty King Mohammed V and Serge Verdugo, the president of the community, many others were involved to assure that not only was it at the highest level, the king even gave a dinner for us at the Royal Palace, which we're told is the first time ever in Moroccan history that such a thing took place when under those circumstances, and he had the whole cabinet there and the leaders of the Moroccan business community, and it was a kosher dinner. and I'm saying a magnificent smorgasbord and spread that you don't even see in the fanciest weddings here in New York. It was truly breathtaking.
Okay,
and
what did you?
The same thing is true when we visited some of the old where the Jewish communities were, and the king had gone for the dedication of a 500-year-old synagogue that was rehabilitated at his instruction, and found out that the names of the streets, which originally were Jewish names, were changed, and he ordered them all changed back. And when we came there, we saw Yeshiva Street. We saw streets named for Jewish people that he had ordered be restored. He also restored the Jewish cemeteries, many of which we visited. And in every city, we were met by the wali, and then we met the foreign minister, all the top ministers, and in-depth discussions with them. The foreign minister, interior ministers, about security, about all aspects of international relations. And I have to tell you, on the streets, when we walked on Shabbat to and from shul to our dinners, people would just yell out "Good Shabbos" to us. We had security, obviously, but I have to tell you, we were never felt threatened. We never felt under any kind of sensitive or difficult position.
This is marvelous. Malcolm, what do you think it says in general about the way in which Israel and the Jewish community in general is being regarded in portions of the Arab world?
Well, first I have to say that Morocco, I give the credit in large part to the king, who sets the tone both by his personal actions, his statements, his relationship with the community, and also because there is a long history of the Jewish community that even predates Islam, and they say that as many as half of the people there may have Jewish roots. There is a strong identity. There's even a movement amongst Muslim students on campus to restore the Jewish heritage, to protect it, to perpetuate it, and so much of Jewish life permeated Moroccan life. So I'm not sure that it's typical, but what we did see on our way back, we stopped in Egypt, where we met with President Sisi and had a 2-hour intensive discussion with him. But over the last month, I visited other Arab countries, and we see the same thing there. There is a new relationship with Israel, a new appreciation. There is a desire, because of the threat of Iran, because of the desire to work together with Israel's new energy prowess, to work together on security, which is seen, and fighting terrorism and the threats that are current in the Mediterranean and, of course, in the Middle East, and the instability in the Middle East. They came to realize that Israel is a source of stability, not instability. So you hear very different things, a very different tone, a very different tenor and content in discussions in the Arab world today.
But wait, does that give you a sense of optimism that you may not have had before?
It has, that I believe that there are possibilities to do things, and the talk of a regional solution, whether it's really feasible, we have to test, but I certainly see the desire to create and to pursue this idea we had of the Mediterranean Initiative to bring Israel as a hub, and Egypt we talked to about it, and they said they're going to bring the Gulf states and many European countries. There is a desire to have a new relationship, and that could create a changed climate in the region, one that maybe would get the Palestinians to the table, and most of all, one that maybe unite the forces against the major threat in the area, which is Iran.
Okay, so speak for one moment. How do you feel now the Iran deal is going? There are some who are very critical, and some who are saying Iran is keeping right to the letter of the law. What's your sense of... has it looked good over the last year or so, or are you concerned?
No, I'm deeply concerned because, first, for one thing, the breakout period is not that far off in historic terms. Second, we know that they're violating, and that they launched again today another missile, that they are building these small, fast ships that are harassing our ships and trying to block them at the Straits of Hormuz and other places. We see their aggressiveness in Syria and their building of this Shiite crescent, both through Syria and Iraq, getting to the Mediterranean, that they want a permanent presence in Syria. They are moving closer to the Golan with their Hezbollah allies. We see them threatening the regimes, the moderate regimes in the region. There is nothing that gives us one comfort about where Iran is at. They don't need to have the weapon. They need the threat of the weapon. And they are moving ahead on the other aspects of the nuclear program, meaning weaponization, fitting it to a delivery vehicle. The ballistic missile tests indicate that they are becoming more and more advanced. And you have to look at what North Korea is doing, because there's a synergistic relationship with Iran there as well.
Yes.
So I have no comfort from the JCPOA. The money that went there is fueling terrorism. They've increased money to Hamas and Hezbollah, but they still face financial problems, those terrorist organizations. But Iran did not use the money to benefit the people. It benefited the leadership, and it's enhancing their expansionist activities.
Okay. We only have another minute or so left. At one point, I need you to sit with me face to face, talk about the Iran perspective in a larger way. But you saw that when you were in Israel, we had a sort of a change in the Supreme Court of Israel, which has concerned some American Jews. There's a sense that perhaps the Israeli Supreme Court is moving to the right and that it signals something about Israel as a whole. Take 1 minute, Malcolm. What would you share? What perspective would you share with our viewers about Israeli society today and what the Supreme Court shift means?
Well, I'm comforted by one thing, that Israel is a democracy, and like the concerns here, different people come in and out, and I understand the concerns. I share some of the concerns about some developments in Israel and things that have been moving, but I remain confident about where the majority of the people of Israel are, and whether there'll be elections in the near future, people don't know. There's a lot of speculation about that, but I think that the commitment, and every poll shows it, remains the same. Both commitment to peace, commitment to democracy, commitment to fair standards remains amongst the Israeli people. And I just have to add one thing that I didn't mention, is we also went to Cyprus, where we had amazing meetings with the president, defense minister, foreign minister, including a wonderful ceremony with the Israeli ambassador and the defense minister and a military band at the site of a British hospital where 2,200 Jewish babies were born during the period of incarceration of the Jews on the island, to block them from going to Israel. 2,200 babies were born. The hospital was knocked down, but they put up a marker there, and they had a little Quonset hut there. And Jeff Wiesenthal, one of the people on the trip, saw his mother's picture in that in that display.
That's a wow.
But it was an incredible story. It's one that I hope we have a chance to explore later on.
I would love to. What a wonderful trip you had. You always do. And again, one year I must be with you because what you do is just spectacular. Anyway, Malcolm, thank you for giving us some time. Now that you're back, we'll meet again very soon. I wish you Chag Sameach for the holiday of Purim, and I hope everything is well for you and your family. You do fabulous work. Malcolm, you're my first love. Don't ever forget that. And you be well.
Thank you. It's mutual. And I feel like I live Purim all year round, so it's a special significance for me here.
Thank you so much. Be well.
Take care.
You too. Malcolm Hoenlein, the Executive Vice Chairman of the Conference of Presidents of Major American Jewish Organizations. And again, he does spectacular work for the world Jewish community, certainly for American Jewry, and it's so interesting to hear his perspective on a range of subjects. As always, my thanks to our director, Sloan Copeland, production coordinator, Serge Goldberg, JBS's associate director, Dara Golub, editors, Dennis Golan and John McDevitt, and to the producers of this edition of In the News, Kara Lilienthal and Jan Weiss. Until the next time, I'm Mark Golub. Be well, my friends.